Welcome to Debut Interview Series, and I am so excited. This is the first time that we're doing Facebook Live. I'm Kevin Cordy, I'm that crazy practitioner of play. And if you don't know what debut is, you'll find out soon enough. But we have a fusion of storytelling and play, and we take three professional storytellers who tell a story for the very first time ever. Never for the public, but for you at debut. And since I've studied play, we play with that story after, and the people who are listening or watching, they will give suggestions that will move the play. But before all that, we'd like to find out who the storytellers are. And this time, we're doing it on Facebook Live. And my first guest, well, my only guest today here on Facebook Live, is well worth being the first. Let me tell you about True Thomas. He's a professional storyteller, public speaker, creative coach, published author, and even a ULC minister. He's known for his wide repertoire of multicultural, traditional science fiction and fantasy tales, and his exciting style for folks of all ages. He's performed everywhere from Renaissance fairs to with little kids. He's also a Christmas performer. And if you have little kids watching Facebook Live right now, we smile at them, we say hello to them, but we let you know if they're believers, they might want to step away a little bit for this interview because we love the magic of Christmas and we want to continue the magic of Christmas. That's what's on print about our performer, but let me tell you what I know about him. He's a friend, he's a colleague who knows how to capture storytelling and bring audiences for whatever event it is. His tales are compelling and they will take you to the far away to the close. And he does it in a true style that merits his name. It is such a privilege and a pleasure to have him on debut today. Let me introduce to you the one and only, the accomplished, True Thomas. Hello, True!
Oh, it's really wonderful to be here.
It is great to see you. How's everything in California?
You know, uh, I hate to say it, but it's, 70s and 80s and sunny, just like it usually is.
Oh, I
uh,
hear you. I hear you there.
I miss actual weather. If I had like, a couple of weeks of snow, the occasional rain and thunder boomers and everything, I would be a happier man. But as you know, you having lived in California yourself, we don't really have a winter so much as we have a very prolonged fall. Essentially all the beautiful leaves turn colors and everything later, and then go all the way until about February, March when the rain knocks them down.
Well, I know when I first arrived in California, it was in Bakersfield where I was living. The air conditioner in my car said, because I drove it from Ohio, I am not going in the 117 degrees. I'm
Mhm.
quitting now.
Oh
So
my God.
it's a, and then I realized I drove all that way for a teaching job and I hadn't prepared a place to live. So it was a whole different world. I
Oh yeah.
had to get my advance on my salary. That leads. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to say about Facebook Live, if you're out there listening, please go ahead and put us in a comment. Or as we begin talking about the process of storytelling or story making, you can put it in the comment section and I can bold the comments out and we can address those comments. So if you're listening, give us a shout out. Sometimes I don't know if it's working, but we'll see what happens. That leads us to where did we meet, True?
I think we met at a storytelling conference, probably a storytelling conference or some storytelling get together. And I could tell immediately you were somebody who was deeply interested in how story happens. And so, you and I had a chance to geek out with each other, and that was absolutely wonderful. Speaking of which,
Please.
yeah, hang on a second here. I just ran into some amazing books by this guy. There's this one, Playing with Stories,
Oh,
and then uh, You Don't Know Jack. and that's an amazing book, and which I'm just starting to read into them. And then you recommended this one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
sorry, here we go. And so, anyhow, thank you for the level up there because I'm going to really enjoy reading these.
Oh, so appreciate that. And I'm not paying him to endorse all of it. But one thing I remember, actually, many things that I remember, we spent some time. You looked at me and said, you know, these people think they know how to bring storytellers together, but they haven't done guerrilla storytelling.
Mhm.
Can you tell us what guerrilla storytelling is?
So, one of the cool things about being a storyteller is that you can find a story for any topic and any occasion. And anytime where you have a chance to sit down, I mean, because our lives live in stories. The brain is designed to listen and interpret information through story. And so when we uh, just get a chance to tell stories, whether it's in an elevator or a school bus or, randomly on the street. Um, so like for instance, I any place where there's a chance to have some fun and make some magic, I will tell stories. And so, it doesn't matter if it's a pier in Santa Monica, it doesn't matter if it's, in a youth facility or wherever I just happen to be at that time. I'm not afraid to do a storytelling call or bring people in or just say, "Hey, that reminds me of a story. Would you like to hear a story?" And they kind of look at you and go, "Hmm." And most people will have the reaction of like, "Oh, I don't have the time." And so sometimes I don't tell them I'm going to tell them a story. I'll just launch into it. And then they'll go, 10 minutes later, "Oh my God, that was a wonderful story." And I'll go, "Right?"
And you know, we need to answer in story. It is so important that we get these story moments and we let them pass because we're so busy with a calendar or a schedule. And it's so important that you call. I like what you say about call people into story. Can you give me an example?
Well, it's interesting. I'm a big one of a couple of themes that I focus on, Celtic and Norse. And in the Irish tradition, they actually have stories about people who have no stories. And so, generally speaking, if you can get people talking about something that they love or they care about or something they felt, you can get them talking about stories. And then, for instance, I might, if I was in an area where I was actually, told to tell stories, I might do a storytelling call. Um, storytelling time, storytelling time. Come and listen to my stories, come and listen to my rhymes. I will tell of the ancient days of our forefathers' time. Storytelling time, storytelling time. Lords and ladies, jelly beans and crocodiles, come on in and have a seat for a while. I will regale you with fantastic tales. Come, you've got it made. Come have a seat here in the shade.
And I've told this to True, but I'll tell it to everyone else. I have adapted the way that I call in the story all because of True. And my wife will say, "No, not that shit again." But she secretly loves it too. And
You
I
know,
don't do it as well as True, but I do it for me to you.
well, aw, and I cut that call actually by about half. I hold the note longer, but because it kind of like when people hear the note extending and extending and extending, they go, "All right, who's that long-winded gas bag?" And so, but it will grab their attention. But I was inspired by Jackie Torrance, who had a wonderful storytelling call. God bless her. And so I said, I want to have something like that. So please, everyone who just heard that one, take it, file the serial number off, adapt it, and please use it. And then also, you could also put a button on the end of the story when you're working with a crowd or something where you leave it with a little bit of a rhyme or bring the warm fuzzies. And by all means, use everything in the storyteller arsenal. Use prosody, the music of words. rhyming and alliteration and volume changes and changing your timbre and character work and all the beautiful things that you can do as a storyteller.
True, I have to tell you, this is just coming to me. There was a time, that we do these artist convention things where you only get 10 minutes and then you get to the next person and they see if the school or library will pick us up. I remember there was a person, she was wonderful, nice, but she was overtime. And like, I
Hmm.
only had now, and I'm now at 8 minutes, and I haven't even got on yet. And I started going, storytelling, storytelling. She looked at me and says, "Oh, I understand now."
Yeah, what I actually teach storytelling. I have a school that I teach Christmas performer workshops, and then also I teach storytelling as just normal storytelling. And one of the cardinal sins that I teach them straight up is never go over time.
Very.
And I have to tell you, it's because the last thing you want to do is leave some poor person who has a 20-minute piece, 7 minutes because they've had three performers in front of them and they've all gone 2 minutes over.
I agree. And we have a friend in Rachel Hedman who really loved what she said. Will call people into story, and actually, that's worth even more talk in the sense of how often do we, when we're first starting, and this is the way I've heard it, you can tell someone that's first starting out because they're worried about the story that they're telling, but someone who's done it for a while is wanting to see that the whole program works for everyone and
Hmm.
really call people into the story. And so while you're telling stories, how do you make decisions on the next one or the next one?
Um, well, so my stories tend to run around, I either do really short ones, a bunch of them in series, or I'll do a like a 20-minute, 23-minute story. Um, because I'm doing my stuff is almost always traditional oral tradition, so folk tales, myths, legends, that sort of thing. And so generally I'm gauging it off the energy of the crowd. Um, the thing is what's the old recipe? Um, uh, uh, ha ha, aha, ah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so that's kind of you want to give them first, you give them a little bit of a joke, get them engaged, then you give them a twist, right? Something that makes them go, hadn't thought of that. And then you give them the warm fuzzies at the back end, something where they go through something with the main character and everything, and at the end of it they go, ah. And that's, that seems to be a really good recipe. I recommend it.
True, when people are making stories, I think they need to think about those ahas as well. I think pivotal things of stories is episodes, is events, as opposed to denouement, plot, moving that way. Plot for me doesn't drive a story as much as character and trouble. The books that you just
Yeah,
brought are great.
there has, yeah. I will pull them out again. I'm not afraid.
No worries.
I will happily tempt my friends. There's no problem. But the thing I was going to say is, yeah, you're absolutely right. As we know, unless the protagonist gets challenges, something that really, something that makes the audience invest and engage in that character, the story isn't going to go anywhere. And a lot of people have forgotten, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people forget that the story lives in the struggle and it's the challenges. If Luke Skywalker, walks up and kills Darth Vader, it's a very boring story, and vice versa. The whole struggle, the give and the take, is where the story lives, and so you have to make that meaningful for your audience.
It does. It lives in the struggle, and when you're making stories or reinterpreting or looking at cultural folk tales, do you sit yourself a desk and chair and start rewriting an idea, or do you use play in a different way, or what's your process? Is basically what I'm asking.
So it really depends on the kind of stuff I'm doing. So, like for instance, for a debut, I don't know if people caught the fact that I'm not telling a story for the first time. What I'm doing is I'm creating a brand new story that is going to be debuted for the first time. You might want to clarify that with
Yeah,
people.
well, that's true. A brand new story, right?
Right.
Definitely. Thank you.
That
So
has
the
never
the
been heard
audience,
before.
yes, the audience is, you haven't heard it from someone else, and we're going to
Yep.
hear it together.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have no idea how the story is going to hit. Um, so my process is Doug Lipman said it probably best. What's the most important thing? And so he's a fantastic storytelling coach. I highly recommend him. Um,
I agree wholeheartedly.
and So what I do is when I look at a story that I run in, so I'm always reading and I'm always looking for new stories. And I run into a story that I'm going to, let's say I'm bringing it out of folklore or something. I find what I like about the character. What is it about that character that just makes me go, "Oh, this is so cool." If it's a Jack Tale or Hoja Nazardine or uh, any of the other traditional folk tales or something, Cuchulainn from mythology. What is it I like about that character? And I kind of chew on that for a while. And then after I've kind of gotten myself into the head of the character, I go, okay, so I'm seeing the world from his perspective. Now I'm going to pull myself out and I'm going to see it from the perspective of the people who are challenging him or whatever is challenging him. And so I try to flip it and see what's going on from their side. And then I pull it up and I look at it and I say, how would I narrate this if I weren't ever dropping into character? And so my goal is to look at it from every angle that I can and imagine it. And then after that, I do character work. I start talking like the character. I start moving. I try to figure out what their key gesture is. I kind of try to figure out what their voice is. And then one of the tricky parts as a storyteller is knowing how to switch voices. How you're going to go from character to character and back to the third person narrative. And so being able to bounce back and forth to all those different things really it helps you pull the story together. And then after that, I go find victims and I practice on them.
Or people to give gifts to, whatever way you
Sure,
want to.
sure.
Yeah. I always say that in the story making process, I wonder, imagine, and have you considered are great tenets to drive stories. So, for example, I'm wondering right now about Charon of River Styx, and I'm like, how
Oh
did he
yeah.
get there? How did he get there? So I'm writing a story on how Charon became Charon, but I have to borrow from all the myth to get there. If we're going to revisit the myths, do you find yourself revisiting the myths for the unanswered questions through
Oh
the
yeah. Oh yeah. And what's interesting is especially if so I create stories from whole cloth as well. I create, brand new stories, some that are very similar to or already existing oral trad, and then I create science fiction stories and fantasy stories. So I'm not always pulling from myth, folklore, or legend, although that's my main go-to. So to give you an example, you're using Charon in the River Styx. So so he always demands coins for
Mhm,
people to cross.
mhm.
What does he do with the coins?
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
And how did
Is
he
there
get them? How did he get
it,
those coins?
right. Well, no, he gets the coins from the dead, but I mean, what does he do afterwards? Does he go hit the pub? Is there a pub that he goes to? You know, and then the other cool thing that he could probably talk on is first person. He could talk on all the people who have been in his boat, and
Yes,
he can talk about all the people who have tried to trick him, and he could talk about
exactly.
uh, and then you get into the fields of Elysium and some of those other things by different methods. And so again, he's a very interesting character that we never really focus in on or find anything about.
Did he have a family?
That's a good question.
Okay, the
I
ferry.
don't know.
How did he become the ferryman? Was that his goal or vocation? Um,
Well, in folklore motifs, one of the things you see with the ferryman is the damned ferryman. And so
Yeah.
what happens is essentially the person is doomed to cross people back and forth until he can find somebody else to take the pole. And
Right.
then that person gets the pole and they're stuck being the ferryman.
But I started thinking about what is the magnetism that has to the keep him on the boat. And
Yeah.
for me, it's a composite of many people's souls. That's a whole different story that I'm working on.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
it starts in a 50s diner. And the
Well,
guy, I mean, I don't mean the guy beside him has a shirt that has the old Thor and it says "I abhor the Thor" on it.
uh, there's a couple of wonderful cartoon series um, about Death and or Hades and Persephone and Kerberos. And apparently, Kerberos, when translated back into the ancient Greek, means spot.
Oh,
So
right.
Hades has a dog named Spot.
That's hilarious. And imagine a story written from the Spot's perspective. I have
Oh
read
yeah,
some things that way.
yeah.
But taking those moments. So I got those moments. I walk 45 minutes a day and I play. People avoid me sometimes when I'm walking, but then I tell them what I'm doing and they ask me for a story, which, is really important. And so we need to find other ways, like you said, you go and you play with the voices and you find victims to hear the stories, because storytelling is an organic thing, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I mean, in terms of how a working teller works, it's not quite that organic. You're setting up times and schedules and
Right,
that sort of thing.
right.
One of the things I absolutely love is I'm a member of the Society of Creative Anachronism, or the SCA, and they recreate medieval history. Imagine going to a fair, but without the customers. It was just everybody there, and nobody was doing it for money. And so at night, at wars and things like that, I wander from fire to fire telling stories, which is a unique experience for any storyteller because you're looking at each group, and each group might have a different theme. They might be Vikings, or they might be pirates, or what have you. And it's literally the wild audience on the hoof. And so you go in, and maybe you're going to be able to engage with them and tell a short story and a couple songs, or maybe you're going to be there for 4 hours. You really don't know. And it has had a huge effect, a formative effect on me as a performer, both the SCA and performing at Ren fairs, because you learn how to read an audience and to quickly go through what's in your head, and because it's so unstructured, it's perforce very organic, because generally in those situations they don't know I'm coming by. I'm literally walking up to their door.
And I have to say that I've been privy to that with True, and I look at story differently. I mean, as an invitation, as a knock on the door, you got to knock different ways. But having True sit with you and tell you what factions are doing what and what meat I should be drinking, but whatever the case may be,
Speaking of which, I'm going to be at the Potrero War down near San Diego Memorial Day weekend. Kevin, you are certainly welcome to come stay in my camp.
I would love to. I know that Hanford had the largest Renaissance fair.
I have never been to Hanford. I need to go to
Would
Hanford.
have to go if I still had connections, but we'll show them this video. But it was brilliant. The only other time it wasn't brilliant is that my students, I had a youth storytelling group, and they practiced, and one of my students decided to do a somersault acrobat thing to the mouth of another one of my students because he was
Ooh.
being a king, a foolish king, and this was not anything we prepared. But I remember walking the Renaissance fair saying, "So how are your parents about you being hit in the face?" It was this young little girl, but she was fine. She was okay. She was
Well, one of the big advantages to doing something like that is it does teach you the rough and tumble of being a working teller. And so I've had drunken belly dancers, wars take off in the middle of my set, the queens progress through, cannons going off. And then also as a working teller, at events and everything, You name it, I've had it happen to me. Every storyteller that you talk to who does it professionally has a hell gig story. And believe me, they can tell you some things that'll make you just want to run for the door. So, but the thing is you need those stories, you need those experiences to make you a strong teller.
I agree wholeheartedly, and that's why sometimes we shouldn't just say yes. Um, I think it was Katie Knudsen wrote an article that storytellers need to be in the places that storytellers are not always, and that could be the saloons, that could be the bars, that could be the families of three or four. I mean, I've talked to one of my. I talked to one teller who'd been telling for a while and said, I anymore just show and tell. That's the only I go when I have something to or sell and tell. They had something to sell, so they tell. And I was like,
Mhm.
I never want to be that. I never want to be that. I want to be the person that goes to the unfamiliar places and moves story that way. That and goes into the challenges like you're saying, because it'll make us a better teller and we'll understand the world.
So one of my specialities is I'm a reenactor performer. I create characters that are in different time periods, and then I research everything about that character, that time period, and everything, and try to present myself as a performer from that time period. So I might be a Viking, I might be a pirate, I might be, a traditional Celtic bard, and so that requires a certain amount of work, just to get the costuming and to learn about the times and so on and so forth. And by no means am I perfect at what I do. I am not. But there's a certain kind of magic when you start talking to a character and they're bringing the world to life because they're believable. And then when that person starts singing songs of their time period or telling stories or rhymes or poetry or what have you, it's magic. And so, not too long ago, Stephen Holland, our buddy
Oh
Stephen
yeah,
Holland,
oh yeah.
the bugger sent me a particular suit, and I put it on, and I went, "Oh my god, I have to research a character and bring it to life? Oh no, I've never done that before." And I found out that there was just so much lore for me to splash around in. And it turns out in the Christmas community, there are some other storytellers, but one of the problems is a lot of the Christmas performers think that they're storytellers because they read the night before Christmas. And that's not quite storytelling. That's story reading, which is in itself an art
Oh,
form.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But they think of themselves as storytellers. But we do have in the Christmas community, we've got Paul Akert, we've got Stephen Holland, we've got Ross Tarr, we've got Mylinda Butterworth, we have Jim Beidle. We have a lot of people who are really talented storytellers who are doing it in persona. And I have to tell you, when I finally got into that persona and started telling stories from that perspective, it was amazing. And the cool thing was is that my audiences, if I told them, "Hey, book me, I will dress up in a costume and come tell stories," like for St. Patrick's, right? Because I'm big on the Celtic.
Happy
I
St.
would hardly get any gigs. But because I was a certain jolly guy, they'll bring me in and then I start telling stories. They're like, "Oh, that's the most amazing thing ever." And so we have to break down those barriers so that people start seeing storytelling as something that should be part of all our events. There should be, I mean, there obviously, there are going to be situations where it's really not appropriate, but the truth is so much of our entertainment and everything and all the different ways we help, whether it's the healing arts or troubled youth or whatever it is, we can find an application for story. And we need to bring that back into our culture because one of the things is people are really missing the meat of the tongue. They're really missing that chance to engage and visualize without the electronics.
It's ingrained in our in the way that we process and think. We think in story. Lisa
Yeah.
Kron says that we're wired for story, and we need to answer. And only lately, businesses have begun to realize that they're not selling product; they're selling story, and that communities get stronger when stories are allowed, whether you're in costume or not. The other thing we need to remember is that story is an art and a practice that
Hmm.
improves when we're in a community that supports it, both in the making, so getting with other storytellers like my Linda or Jim or whomever makes you a better Christmas teller of that person because you can share that common experience. Some people
Hmm.
they go to a library and they leave. I always say the best storytellers stay, they come an hour early and they leave an hour late if they can.
Generally, they have a stack of books they're meaning to read that they bought that they're really excited to get and they still haven't gotten to.
Well, a friend of ours, Michael McCarty, uh,
Oh, yes. I love
who
me some Michael.
rumor has it will be on debut. Just his car tells a story, but he tells an even more powerful story. And I know that he stays and says, "You like that one? Come on over and hear this one," or gives out free books. Storytelling should be an experience, not something that's just on the calendar. What do you think?
Um, so every storyteller has a different kind of mojo.
Oh, sure.
And so I was at the San Diego National Storytelling Conference, and they had I think it's called an Olio, where they had a bunch of different
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
yeah, a bunch of different tellers, and they had Sarah Salter get up there, and she told a story about an Appalachian weir panther, and she, I am telling you, she moved her hand twice. I counted. I mean, literally, hand twice, and she just had you riveted just by her voice and her pacing and everything. And then Michael D got on stage, and he's an explosion on stage. All the energy, all the everywhere, and everybody is going to have those. They should be experience all different kinds of tellers, and then they're going to find the ones that really engage them. Um, Mark Lewis, just was, I miss him terribly. Fantastic, fantastic storyteller. He has his particular style. And that's one that I was really, one that I really like. Oh my God, how do you do that? Okay. And I think what happens in society is because we see storytelling so rarely, we don't know that this person's style and that person's style, it's like going out to dinner. What do you want to eat that night? And if you really love Mongolian food, we need to get you to a Mongolian restaurant. And so my style may not be for everybody, but on the other hand, I bet you I can find a teller who will suit your style.
Exactly. And we should be open to how people look at story as an art and a practice. We shouldn't change everyone to be us. Go ahead.
And one of the things I would say is to any of the tellers, especially the new tellers who are out there, I would recommend two things. Number one, tell to everyone, even if you're not going to do it. If even if telling to pre-K or telling to seniors isn't your cup of tea, do it anyway, at least a little bit, so what the modality is there. One of the things I see is hothouse flowers. They know how to perform for what I call hostage audiences. Okay. They need to get out there and practice and perform for as many ages and stages as they possibly can, because that's how you learn how to be a well developed storyteller. Because trust me, the world will throw curveballs at you every time. You never know. You'll show up and they'll say, "Oh, you're telling a story to kids," and there's you know 50 times more adults in the room who are also listening. So you got to play to them too.
So true. The last word that you used is another way that we become better tellers, and that is through play. So
Hmm.
and I'm a little biased, but I am a crazy practitioner of play. But tell
Hmm.
me how play is important, if at all, to your work in story making and storytelling.
Well, first of all, who doesn't love playing pretend? And so when you're bringing a character to life, if you're going to be the big bad wolf, you know, one of my exercises that I teach is imagine the big bad wolf brushing his teeth. So what would that be like? And having so bad. What is, and so having fun and playing with that. I mean, if you ever see a storyteller just having fun and practicing different facial gestures and voices and everything in the car, you would swear that they were having some sort of convulsion, and you would leave them alone. That person's obviously twitching. Yeah, so, but I mean, I will be doing that as I'm walking down the street or what have you. One of my favorite characters is Dame Ragnall from The Loathly Lady.
Oh yeah.
And so oh, the lovely, beautiful Gawain. We're going to get married. We're going to get married. And I'm just having so much fun with that character. So I'm literally trying to think of how I'm going to be more disgusting, which how often do you get a chance to do that? And then, and so how do you be menacing? So that just the chance to get out and play with those characters is an amazing amount of play. And then the other thing is when I'm working with my audiences, one of the things I strive really hard for is engagement. And so it was cold, wet, and wishly. Can you make that sound for me? And everybody goes, and then, or I'll say, and then Thor played his favorite game, Whack a Giant. And now I'm going to point to you, and you're going to make the sound of an exploding giant. Here we go. And I point to them, and they go, oh, or and I make jokes about the sounds they make, and get them engaged. Or I will pick up people out of the audience and I'll turn them into what I call propels, you know. And so I will grab somebody who's huge, and then I'll grab a little kid. So imagine, little Cullen is facing a giant, right? And the kid's like, you know,
So
and the person's looking down and going, right.
So I'm hearing that you'll do in the story practice, you'll do voices. In the storytelling, you even bring people up to show like the size or the fun of it.
Oh yeah, and I'll get them to play I will often, not always, but depending on the story, I will get them to play different characters. And then even if you're just going, because there's a technique called the circuit where you're pulling people in. And what you're looking for is the nod and the eye flash. And so when you look at somebody and you're getting good face from them, you walk over to them, you talk to them, and then you turn your body and you look over to the other side and you find that other person. And then you nod to that person, you bring yourself over to the other person, and you start talking to them kind of conspiratorially. And they give you the nod, and then you move back, and then you bring them both together. And so now you have a circuit, and you keep doing that. And so even if it's at the meta language level of physicality and everything, you're getting that engagement. If you're reading their bodies, you're watching their facial expressions, you're listening to how they breathe and blink, everything.
I was with Odds Botkin once, and he got really serious.
Oh my goodness, what a fantastic teller.
Oh, one of the best. And he said, "Kevin, do you realize," in an Odds way, he put his two hands up here. He said, "There are 58 faces from here to here." He said, "Look in the mirror and show them all." And I was like dumbfounded. He just went, "Wow!" And as we know, Odds is amazing, and does so much. So play isn't part of our process, and so sometimes I call myself, I say we handcuff ourselves to print if we haven't played into the world that we're creating first. And
Hmm.
I'm a writer. I'm a director of writing projects, and but sometimes we get stuck to one way of thinking. And
Yeah.
like you said, you say it out loud, you play with ideas, and I just think, there's a social psychologist, Vygotsky, who said in problem-based play, we are quote unquote a head taller merely because we're working.
It's it's my feeling that people who are born to be storytellers, they don't think out of the box. They don't know what a box is. When I was a little kid, I was in kindergarten and they were having us do finger painting. And the teacher came over, and my painting was this huge blob of black. And the teacher said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a cave full of bats." And the teacher went, "Uh huh."
We
You
have
know,
a You
But I
gotta
mean,
love it. I mean,
right, but that's the thing about storytellers is we are the canaries in the coal mine of human existence.
and we keep singing.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is we're more sensitive. It's our job to be aware of what's going on around us, and then try to find the parts of it that need to be reflected back to make us a better human.
And if we work in a landscape of probability and possibility with someone else, I think our story dimensions and awareness grows when we're working together. And
Oh
it
yeah.
and it is so important. And rooted in some of the old ways that how stories learn, often it was, especially at a guild level, you tell your story, somebody will say, that was really nice. Where'd you get that? Okay, that's the extent. And the next person comes out. We're slowly learning that this work merits more talk and more practice and more
Well,
play.
we have a problem in the storytelling community because uh, people are copywriting stories. They take a trad story, they put their spin on it, and then copyright it. And the problem is they're all taking stuff out of the cauldron of inspiration, but they're not putting anything back in. And that's a challenge. That's something we need to figure out around. The other thing is we're talking a lot about who has the right to tell what story, but the one of the superpowers of storytelling is transmigration, how stories move from culture to culture when somebody hears a story. So in the a traditional bard knew 300 forms of meter and rhyme and could entertain for 3 months, never repeating himself once. Their job literally was to listen to that story and memorize it and then tell it as perfectly as they could the way they heard it, because that's how they replicated and passed on this knowledge. Now, then after they had memorized and everything, they were absolutely allowed to go out and change it and everything, and make their variant. But the problem we have in storytelling today is we're starting to put handcuffs on the storytelling tradition. And if we don't do something about this, if we don't figure out some mechanisms to allow the stories to flow and go, we're essentially, putting storytelling in smaller and smaller and smaller boxes, which is going to make it even harder for people to listen and hear stories.
True, in the words of Bob Dylan, the times are a changing, and I've
Yeah.
talked to people selfishly on for tomorrow's Storytellers Today, which I edited, which is about people 35 and under, or people that work with people 35 and under, on how they are changing the pulse of storytelling, how it's moving. And, it's, as you just pointed out, it's always been at a place of change. There are some central tenets that
Mhm.
I hold to, but some of that's challenged even in that book. And I needed to learn to let go so that people can move forward, because I don't need to be the person saying, you don't, I need to say, um, have you considered this, as opposed to that's not the way we do it.
Right.
So why debut? True. Why debut? Why are you coming on debut?
Well, first of all, I love you, think the world of you. So
Like,
there's that.
likewise.
But any chance I get to promote storytelling, storytelling is my avocation. It is my life path. It's my journey. It's my most important thing. Someday I maybe might get known as being, if when I'm uh, parked to rest, they say, "Oh well, True was an amazing Christmas performer, or pirate, or Celt, or what have you." But if I had people want to remember me truly, if they said True was a fantastic storyteller, that would be my highest honor. Because honestly, I think that what the world needs more than anything is the ability to create, listen, and share stories.
True, I'm
It
not going to
really,
say, but True is a fantastic storyteller.
aw. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, if 90% of the time, if we can get people to listen to stories and to share their stories, we can get past so many of the problems that humanity has. And that's where, and storytelling is also about play, because, as my jolly persona,
Oh,
One
oh,
of the things.
oh.
Oh, yes. Um, as my jolly persona, one of the things I say, "Do you know why I deliver toys?" And they go, "No, why?" I mean, I could be delivering used tires or frozen fish, but I deliver toys. And one of the reasons is that children need to play. That's how they learn how to work with each other and how to create with each other. And one of the things, if you watch children, the little girl has a shark and she's got Barbie, and the shark is going to eat Barbie's head, nom nom nom. And what they're doing is in play form, they're dealing with the challenges of the big bad world. It's literally teaching them how to be human beings. And so, what I'm doing by delivering toys to the world is I'm trying to inspire civilization.
And what a great gift that would be. And I would only argue that adults need that same type,
Oh, yes.
whether
Yeah.
it's role playing games or PS5 or just going out and being more alive because you play. I
Having
literally have my students do 2 days of living in narrative, the way they define it. I give them some ways, and they come back more alive because they lived in story, and then they've written about it and reflect on it, and they're doing that now. And some of them tell me, I didn't know how story was so important to my life. And that's why
Yep.
we need storytellers. So I'm going
Yep.
to give a commercial. Let's see. Whoa, hold on. Debut is happening. When is it happening? March 27th. We're going to see True in
Woohoo!
Arnold and Kristen Ward. And you can get tickets at this particular address here. You definitely need to see True. And you definitely need to see Sheila. And you definitely need to come to Debut. It is the place, it is our virtual storytelling playground. And we want you to come there because it's an important place. Whether True Thomas is talking about that jolly man that he becomes, or a bard or a shope that he delivers at Renaissance fairs, or he's celebrating St. Patrick's as St. Patrick's, and maybe it's not St. Patrick's Day, but the story needs to be heard.
Hmm.
He does it well. And he
Oh, thank.
also is a practitioner like me of play. True, we could talk forever, but right
Hmm.
now, True, you have the last word.
Believe in the power of story. Get out there, create stories, listen to stories, share stories. Believe in the power of story.